Awesome. All right. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well this morning. My name is Rosalie Prendergast. Just a quick introduction and a little bit about me. I am a board certified behavior analyst out in Evergreen, Colorado. And I usually share a tiny tidbit. I got started in this field doing therapeutic horseback riding when I was 12. So just a fun tidbit, and I wish I was still doing that. Good morning, Kathy. Oh, cool. Please feel free to chime in with the chat. I know that there is a question and answer button down at the bottom, but please use the chat to ask your questions because I cannot see the question and answer button when it pops up when I'm sharing my screen. I am going to put the PDF for everybody. It should have just popped up underneath me. There's a PDF and there's a feedback form in there. So please, this should be really informal. If you have questions, if you have comments, please do put them in the chat. If you feel comfortable saying hello in the chat, please do that as well and let us know where you're from. It's been really amazing using this Crowdcast platform because we've kind of talked with people all over the world. It's a blast. So I am gonna get started, share my screen, and we will get into today. But you do have all of the content again in that green button that is below me. So you can follow along, take notes, refer back to it. Also, this recording will be available after this as well. As soon as we're done, actually, you will be able to kind of rewatch the recording. All right, so there we go. We've got my screen up. So today we're talking about kind of persistent demand for autonomy, right? PDA. It's a newer diagnosis in the US. It's been great in Colorado. We've got some psychologists, neuropsychs, things like that, that are actually starting to put it in reports, which I find really exciting. There is much more going on kind of in Europe across the pond from us with this kind of cluster of behaviors. So today we're just going to talk about kind of strategies and supports, and feel free again to throw in those questions you have. If you want to add information, please feel free. We would love kind of your feedback after this event. If you feel like it, there's a feedback form there, but certainly don't need to do that. But it is helpful for us to find out what you want more of during these free events. So we start out all of our trainings, information events with this shared purpose matrix. This is one of my favorite tools from acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a noticing tool. And if you'd like some more information, there's a Crowdcast channel called Matrix Talk, and they do a ton of training on this specific tool. But for right now, I'm just going to kind of get started. And again, this is a time if you want to throw thoughts or ideas in, please go for it. But I'm going to start off in this kind of lower right-hand quadrant, and I'm going to talk about, hey, what's important to this group today, right? What do we care about in this conversation about PDA? And the first thing I'm going to say, who or what's important in our shared purpose of this conversation today are the individuals, right? Finding supports that are helpful. Parents are really important in this discussion. I think educators are critically important. I think ourselves are important. I think we're finding that there's lots of individual parents who also kind of have those PDA kind of clusters, right? So ourselves. I think funders are important. Diagnosticians. And I need to warn everybody, I'm an ADHDer and dyslexic. So you're going to see some red lines appearing on my screen. And you're also probably going to, hear me bounce all over the place a little bit in hopefully a fun way. So other things that are really important in this conversation is, I think, flexibility. Another important piece would be autonomy, checking in on biases, all those wonderful things. So I think that's a pretty good list for right now. I'm going to move over to this kind of lower left-hand corner where the question is, what yucky stuff shows up and gets in the way of this shared purpose, right? Of the shared purpose of thinking about supports for kind of PDA populations. And I think the first thing that gets in the way for me is fear, right? Fear of doing something different, right? Stepping outside of the normal box. Maybe this isn't how we've always done this. The next one for me is probably rigid rules, right? This is how I was trained. This is how I'm going to do this, right? Or this is how we parent. This is how we parented through the generations. Or, oh my gosh, like a little bit of like, I don't know, worry that other parents are going to look down on me because I don't have this list of chores for my kids to do. I think sometimes embarrassment shows up. I know certainly sometimes when I'm talking to other clinicians, I definitely feel like, oh, like, am I doing the right thing here? Oh, now I can't get embarrassment to, oh, there we go. Oh, embracement. That isn't what I wanted, but okay, we'll keep going. I think other kind of yucky stuff that shows up kind of on that inside, right, is doubt, right? Doubt. Is this ever going to get better? Oh my gosh, like we go forward, we go backward. Like, is this ever going to get better? And then I think also those biases show up, right? Those, hey, this is the way we do this, or this is the way we educate children. Those biases show up. All right. Up in that kind of upper left-hand corner, what behaviors will I see or hear from you to get relief from that yucky stuff that shows up? For me, you're going to see me over-researching. I'm going to go to research rabbit hole after research rabbit hole after research rabbit hole outside of behavior analysis. I love researching polyvagal. I love researching linguistics. All of those amazing things. Or you might see me doing nothing, right? That kind of pendulum of like, I'm like totally, yeah, Matt says the research rabbit hole for sure. To move away, right? Move away from that kind of yucky stuff that shows up. Doing nothing at all. You might hear me arguing kindly my point. Arguing my points. Maybe even doing a little yoga. Maybe a few adult beverages. To kind of get some relief from that yucky stuff that shows up. Another one is over creating material. Man, if I just make one more thing, it'll be better, right? If I make one more visual, one more thing, things are going to get easier. All right. I'm going to pop on over to our last quadrant. What behaviors will I see or hear you using to move towards what's important to you in the group? And the first thing I'm going to say is talking, right? Like talking just like we're doing right now, talking about this, right? Talking about how challenging PDA is, talking about how there aren't enough go-to supports currently, collaborating outside of my profession, collaborating, being willing to do things different, listening to others, right? Checking in with myself, right? Checking in with my biases, checking in often. Also regulating my emotions, being a behavior analyst, talking in kind of advocacy realms for autism, you know, we are not well received. So it's really important. I spend a lot of time regulating my emotions from that yucky stuff that kind of shows up for me. Including stuff that's happened in the past, kind of things that I did early in my training that now I don't do because I see it didn't work. Other things, kind of other behaviors to kind of move towards kind of what's important. What you might see or hear me doing is doing a lot of talking to the individual. This is who we're here for. I want to talk to them. All right, that's a pretty good list to start, and we've got a ton of stuff to go through. So I hope kind of throughout this presentation, this learning event, we've all got an opportunity to notice these things showing up for us. I know I certainly will. And thank you for taking the time to do that with me. All right, so we will get into things now. I'm going to share, oh, nice, from Colorado. Awesome. I'm going to share kind of the happy medium point of view. The happy medium is an approach that we've been developing for the last kind of 12 years because we were like, hey, what we're doing isn't working. We're going to do different. So I want to share the noticing grid, which is our point of view. And you're going to hear me talk about it throughout because it really is just a natural way that we language within Eclipse therapy, which is our small practice. And it's based off of this little language pairing, which is too big, too little, just right. And I need to hit the stars first. There is absolutely no list anywhere that kind of predetermine what these are, right? We've really listened to autistics, neurodivergents, where they say, hey, this could be used to kind of force us into a box, to make us mask, camouflage, do some mirroring. And we don't want that. That is not what this tool is about. This tool is about noticing. It's about noticing how your behaviors work within a context. So just want to make sure I say that before we kind of dig into the noticing grid. And I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so it's all on one page, and then I'll blow it back up. And I forgot to warn people, you're going to hear probably my dogs in the background who are not very well behaved. So our noticing grid is, again, a noticing tool. We want to notice the level of escalation, level of regulation, right? When we're just right, we're matching the environment, we're engaged. Remember, this is a tool for us, right? This isn't like, this is what it looks like here, this is what it looks like there. This is a truly individualized tool. When you're at a level 2, you're starting to move a little bit faster, getting a little bit too big or a little bit too small for the environment. And when you're at a level 3, that's fight, flight, freeze, collapse, highly dysregulated. Lots of kiddos create these for themselves, right? We've got like goldfish, uninflated puffer fish, and then level 3 is puffer fish. We've got kitty cat, like lion, tiger. So this noticing grid doesn't have to stay looking exactly like this, but it can become their own tool. So our next column over, these are what other people see. Parents are incredible observers of their children. You guys know way before providers usually when dysregulation is occurring, right? So you are critical to supporting us in helping, in understanding, right? What are these levels of escalation? What are we going to see when your child's starting to dysregulate, right? So at a level 1, what do they look like when they're matching, when they're on the basketball court playing, having fun with friends? Are they a little bit kind of in people's faces and competitive, which is still just right for basketball? When they're sitting at the dinner table, are they engaging in are they engaging in back and forth conversation, right? What does that look like based on different contexts that they engage in? How do they match their environment? What do they start to look like when they get a little bit too big or a little bit too small? Those are those subtle signs that aren't as salient to new people, might not be as salient to grandma and grandpa or aunts and uncles or friends who come over for dinner. What are those things that you notice that we don't, that you can help us get that information quickly? And at a level 3, what do they look like when they're completely dysregulated? Our next column over is what are other people going to do? This is our supportive zone, right? When we're at a level 1, how are we going to support you in contacting those environments that you love, that are going to bring you joy, right? What are we going to do when you're starting to get dysregulated, right? How are we going to support you in getting back to that matching the world from your lens? And when you're at a level 3, how are we going to support you in staying safe? That's critical, right? How are we going to support you in staying safe? Our next column over, I always say all of these columns are the most important. That's why they're all together. But this one really is critical, right? What tools do we need to build, right? So many people take an eliminative approach. They want to get rid of these behaviors, right? We want to get rid of these level 3 behaviors, these level 2 behaviors, right? We want to build behaviors so that individual can stay at a level 1, so they don't have to need to use a level 2 or level 3 behavior. You know, so how are we going to build a big, broad repertoire of skills for them at that level 1 and level 2? And at level 3, how are we going to teach them how to stay safe, right? So that's a quick loop around the noticing grid. It's a multi-purpose tool, but the biggest one is noticing. It's noticing for the individual, and it's noticing for people who are going to support, right? And how are we going to do that in a compassionate and helpful way towards the individual? All right, I'm going to pull up, make our presentation a little bit bigger so people aren't squinting. But again, you have the presentation down below me in that green button. So I tend to think about, when I'm thinking about different interventions, different sciences, I try to think from this frame of reference, right? Any tool can be used for good or bad. It's really the ethics of the artist using it, right? So you'll hear me often say, like, what is your ethical ripple, right? What's your ethical artist ripple? Whether you're an occupational therapist, whether you're a behavior analyst, whether you're a psychologist, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an SED teacher, right? What is your ethical ripple, right? So that's my frame of reference when I'm coming to kind of think about all of these different ways that we want to support these PDA individuals, and really individuals in general, but especially this population. So why don't we currently have any go-tos for that PDA profile, right? Why don't we? Why can't we say, hey, yes, Ross Green is going to be your go-to bet, right? His strategy is going to work 100%, right? Or, you know, polyvagal, right? Lori Deschutes with her kind of, why can't we say one thing is going to work all the time? And because it's complex, right? There's no universal kind of, we've pulled this together and it's effective for every single human with this behavioral profile. So that's why we don't. It's complex. Each individual with PDA is their own self. So there's a couple of, I love NeuroWild. I think her name is M. She does a lovely job of putting visuals to some of the things that we talk about a lot. So if you aren't following her, I totally would. I really enjoy her stuff, but we're going to talk about some of her visuals here in a minute. But PDA in particular really requires relationship. It requires bi-directional compassion, right? It isn't just this, oh, you know, I'm sitting with you and hanging with you, but it's really that relationship. That's the foundation for helpful supports for individuals with this kind of complex behavioral profile that doesn't always kind of respond to the same thing. So it's also a relatively new diagnosis. It's a relatively new label, right? I think the profile's been around for a really long time, that behavioral profile, but I think we finally just given it a name, which I do wish was not pathological demand avoidance and was persistent demand for autonomy, because that's really the way that I look at that kind of cluster of behaviors together. This is the way I want to do it, and I feel like it's amazing. Come on, let me do it this way. So it is that kind of newer diagnosis, right? So we don't have a lot of things, a lot of research hasn't really focused specifically on this cluster of behaviors together. When we think about greater systems, right, we know that systems we need systems, right? Because we need to create order, we need to have efficiency. If everybody just did willy-nilly all the time, right, the world would be in chaos, and we can't have that. But all of our systems right now don't work too well for PDAers, right? They don't have the flexibility and the ways to create kind of autonomy for those individuals. So it's kind of like, hitting up against a brick wall, the education system, the therapeutic system, even the medical system, right? Like even trying to go into the dental office to engage in, how can I support in flexibility here? I'm very lucky. I have a father-in-law who's a dentist. So we've done a lot of work in his dental office that does allow for that flexibility and autonomy of how to get things done. It's been really phenomenal. But anyway, the medical system as well. So PDAers aren't linear, right? Right? Sometimes things go really well and they work, and then the next day you try the same thing and it doesn't work at all, right? It is very kind of, hit or miss here. You really have to pull from what's going on in the environment, also what's going on for them in terms of regulation. And it isn't a willful act of I'm not going to do it. It's an I can't do it. Even though I could do it yesterday, even though I could do it 5 minutes ago, right? Today it's I can't do it. Or 5 minutes later, it's I can't do it, right? And there's so much anxiety that creates that kind of non-linear, all over the place kind of presentation that doesn't lend itself well to kind of linear programming or linear supports. Also, if people are familiar with spoon theory, right? PDAers lose spoons really quickly, right? That can be, man, I was so excited to go to a birthday party. Man, I get to play with my friends. This is so exciting. They do an amazing job at the birthday party. Get home and you got like meltdown, dysregulation central, right? They lost those spoons really quickly. If you don't know what spoon theory is, it's a really great read. And actually, Em on NeuroWild has got has some helpful visuals about spoon theory. And I've actually used that a lot with individuals with PDA to talk about their availability. But anyway, most systems also, schools, therapies, right? They're kind of tied up in this extrinsic, like external rewards and punishments, right? Like carrots, I'm going to take your stuff away. We know that these things don't work very well. And PDAers need intrinsic motivation that's tied towards their values, right? What do they want to accomplish? So I think that's kind of what makes things hard right now, right? All right. So look, what do we know doesn't work? We actually know probably more about what doesn't work than what does work. So let's talk about what doesn't work, because we know what we don't want to do, right? So I want to make sure to continue to emphasize, like, there's stars all over the place, because it's really important to remember that each person is uniquely them, right? So there's no absolutes, right? Nothing I'm going to say today is a rule to take home and say we are absolutely not doing this. Or we absolutely are doing this, because each one of these guys is really truly them. We got to find things that work for them. We don't have that framework yet of like, all right, here's our go-to. So we do know that aversive control doesn't work, right? Aversive control is when the individual wants to get away, right? Their ultimate goal is to get out of. I don't know how many of you guys have children who will, get so dysregulated at school that they get sent home. It is not fun to be that dysregulated, right? But they do that, they get to go home, right? And it's not because they're being naughty, it's because they can't do the control, the aversiveness of the context of the educational setting. They want to get away from that, right? Or, a therapist's car pulls up and, you got a kiddo hiding under the table, won't come out, things like that, right? We know aversive control doesn't work. That's when individuals are working to get away from it, or maybe you've got that kind of PDAer who's a like, I am going to look like the perfect child. Whatever you ask me to do, I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to lose my mind after, right? They want to get out of that. They're going to go as fast as they can. If a therapist has kind of a token system in place, that kid is going to get every single token as fast as they can so they can get the heck out of there, right? Like, get me out of there. That's what aversive control is, and we know it does not work for this population. So we also know anything that increases kind of that level of anxiety where they're expected to stay at that level of anxiety and gut it out, right? We know that that doesn't work well. This is where the noticing grid can be a really helpful tool. And we can talk about that probably in another crowdcast. But anyway, anything that kind of increases that level of anxiety, that isn't to say, right, that somewhat during the progression of support, there isn't going to be some uncomfortable anxiety, but it needs to be at a safe level for learning, not a, I am completely dysregulated, under aversive control, I need out of here. So we know direct demands, right? Adult demands, peer demands, self demands, perceived demands, right? Anything that smells like a demand. Adult directed interactions, right? Those where adults are leading the play, adults are leading everything about that interaction or engagement. Coercive reward systems and extrinsic reinforcement, right? Those carrot systems. There's no carrot big enough to alleviate the anxiety, right? That's building, right? There's no Lego set, there's no, chocolate cake, right? Getting away from that anxiety is way more important than that carrot that can be dangled. We know point systems, same thing. Individuals might engage with these, right? But maybe as soon as they lose a point or something, right? The day is over. Level systems, same thing. So many, SED classrooms or BD classrooms are centered around these point systems or level systems, and they don't work for our guys very well because they are aversive control, right? Like, I want to get that, right? But I've got all these things that are in my way. I just want out of here. Right? First, then language as well, right? They kind of feel that is a demand, right? You are going to make me do something I don't want to do to get something I really care about. Direct language, right? I think way back when I was trained, right? I've been a behavior analyst since 2009, been in the field since 2002, obviously doing therapeutic horseback riding and stuff since I was little. But you're taught, make direct statements. If you want a child to follow through with something, you need to make it not a question, right? And that's opposite for these guys. We know that demanding statements, a really strong, clear point of view can be perceived as a demand. Use statements can be perceived as demanding, right? So we've got to be very thoughtful about our language. Unexpected changes, events that are different in our environment. Those are really challenging for these profile individuals. Making mistakes, right? Little perfectionists at heart, right? Their own mistakes, watching you make a mistake, you making a mistake that you didn't even know was a mistake, right? That's so challenging. Ambiguity is another thing that we know doesn't work. Maybe we'll do that, is not helpful, right? Ambiguous schedules, right? But then also, too tight of a schedule can be too demanding, right? This is where this kind of non-linear, I got a dog on a table. Hang on a second. Lou, come on, get down. All right. Now I got to move the chair so she doesn't get back up there. All right. This is where that kind of non-linear nature, right? Like, we need a framework, but not a tight, demanding schedule, right? It can't be all over the place, but it can't be too tight either. This is what makes things really challenging. How do you support that kind of non-linear, different way about going about things based on so many factors? And we also know sustaining kind of higher levels of escalation or dysregulation don't work, right? If we're too big because we've got heavy emotions, right, and we're dysregulated, or we're dysregulated because we've got light emotions, right? We're super excited. We're waiting for that new movie to come out, right? Sustaining those level 2, level 3 on the noticing grid doesn't work, right? Or that hypervigilance. What's going on? Right? that we lose spoons really, really, really quickly. Oh, man, from Italy. Right? We lose spoons quickly when we're in this kind of sustained higher levels of escalation or dysregulation quickly. So those are the things that we kind of know don't work, right? So what do we know does work, right? What do we know? What have we found that does work? And again, those stars are there. Not everything is going to be kind of a shoe-in for everybody. But we do know appetitive control, right? This is kind of the opposite of aversive control. When an individual wants to move towards that activity, they want to do that. We're building intrinsic motivation. They want to move towards that learning. They want to move towards engaging with peers. They want to go to Taekwondo, right? They want to engage in those different places, right? They want to engage in different activities, right? Maybe they want to do an art class. And they want to engage in different items too, like, wow, I really love sports. Maybe I want to try a different one. And they even want to move towards things that are hard, right? They want to do that. It's not us dangling a carrot. It's not us coercing them into doing it. It's not us offering a, point or a token for trying something hard, right? They want to do it because it is something that they inherently care about, and we are supporting them in moving that direction. So I think that, and I want to make it clear too, appetitive and aversive control, we're under kind of different amounts of both all the time, right? Those things, they're not kind of separable, right? We can't be like, all right, this is going to be all appetitive control from now on. That's all we're doing, right? The world throws things at us. There's unexpected schedule changes. Just yesterday I was having a lovely moment with a kiddo. She found a guitar in the corner of like a theater room and was strumming it and playing it and just totally contacting joy, right? Like happy as can be. And the music teacher came in and picked that guitar up and said, no, you can't play with this one. And did offer a different one, but like it was super abrupt, super aversive, and that music teacher didn't think anything of it, right? But those things are going on all the time. We can't control that always, right? But we can try to make more learning appetitive, make them want to move towards that because they care about it, or we care about it and they care about us, right? Not in a coercive way, but because in a relational way. So there are some interventionist qualities that are really critical to supporting this population. Again, this goes across kind of behavior analysts, registered behavior technicians, occupational therapists, teachers, physical therapists, therapeutic horseback riding people, rock climbing coaches, right? Whoever's going to be supporting an individual with that PDA profile, right? These are some really important qualities, right? And the first is that connection, right? I see you, I get you, I listen to your words, I listen to your movements, I listen to your behavior, and I hear it all, right? Just listening, just seeing isn't enough. I hear you, right? I hear you, I got you. The next piece that's really critical is that trust. Do what you say you'll do and don't do what you say you will not do. One of my favorite things to walk in and say to kids, the first thing I say is, hey, if you ever don't want to participate, all you have to say is no. That's the first thing I say. Hey, I want to let you know anything can turn into a no, except for a safety rule, but anything can turn into a no. And then the next thing I say is I'm going to probably one-up you, which means, if you say no, I might ask you one more time. It's just kind of who I am. I just ask one more time. And some kids, think that's funny. Other kids, that's something that I need to work on and not do that because it isn't helpful to them. But I'm honest about it. I say, I probably am going to slip and do this. Own up to mistakes. They're gonna happen, right? And if you do, that's okay, right? That's part of the world. That's that kind of melding of kind of things that are repetitive, things that are aversive, right? It all goes together. We can't just have one or the other. But building trust takes owning up to those mistakes. They're gonna happen. Also, trust their words and other forms of communication, right? If they're saying they can't right now, right? Or if their behavior is saying that, right? Their level of escalation, their level of regulation is saying, I can't do this right now. We've got to trust that and listen to that. Right? Other forms of communication. And this is where parents are so critical. You guys know those little behaviors, like you start moving faster, you start kind of trying to support, and us interventionists are sitting over there being like, what's going on here? Because you know that level of dysregulation is about to increase where we don't, right? So help us with that. Help us so that we know, right? We know kind of what might be coming so that we can support. Always know they're doing their best, right? These guys do not show up thinking, I'm going to do a bad job today, right? I just don't feel like participating, right? That isn't kind of in their nature, that kind of little perfectionist that lives within that kind of anxiety housing, right? Showing up and not doing well is not what they want to do. After being under a lot of aversive control conditions, they might be there where they're like, I'm just out. I'm opting out. I'm done. I can't do this, right? But it's still an I can't. It's not I won't or I don't want to. It's an I can't do it right now. So really just recognizing, even if we're having a day where we're having a lot of level 3, completely dysregulated, dangerous, unsafe, they are doing the best they can that day, that moment, that second. Another piece is interventionists, therapists, support systems who really value autonomy over independence, right? I sat back to think about this. Neuroclastic kind of posted this visual. They talk a lot about autonomy over independence. And I sat back and I thought about it, like, what do I do that is truly independent? And it's not a lot. I have a lot of support systems around me that help me. I get up on time by myself, right? Like things like that, right? But, my husband helps me with these things. My family helps me with these things. My child helps me with these things, right? I have a lot of autonomy, but I also have a lot of support. So when we think about building systems, particularly for this PDA behavior clusters, right? What we see and what is challenging, it's okay to develop systems that require support from others. That is okay if we don't get to true independence, right? Most of us don't live that way. We live in that autonomous space. So trying to find those kind of therapists who are thinking about that. How can I build this system so it's going to work within their culture, within their family, within their circle of support? Not how can they live on an island by themselves? Because most of us do not live on an island by themselves. The next kind of interventionist quality is compassion, right? No science itself is like compassionate, right? The principles of behavior, the principles within, polyvagal theory, right? They aren't like inherently compassionate. That's a quality that we, as the person who's supporting another human, has. I love Susan David's work. She really kind of spilled out the difference between like sympathy, empathy, and compassion. So when we're thinking about sympathy, you're kind of looking down at or next to a human, and you're saying, I'm sorry you're having a hard time, right? I'm sorry this is hard for you, right? And sympathy is important. It's helpful. Empathy is important, right? I can kind of take your perspective and think about that and kind of join you a little bit, right? But then compassion is taking a whole nother step, right? That is really joining and really saying, I've got you. I am going to support you. So when we make those distinctions between sympathy, empathy, and compassion, It's really important to recognize looking for when you're kind of, I call it people shopping, because you got to find these qualities, right? When you're looking for that clinician that's got that compassion, how are you going to sit in this space with my child and support them, right? I see you are having a hard time. You are in pain. You are suffering. You don't know what to do. How am I going to come to support you? Those are some critical qualities. All right, next we're going to talk a little bit about kind of tools to develop, right? Oh, we can't support these complex humans in silos, right? We can't just say, okay, OT is going to fix it. Okay, behavioral interventions are going to fix it. Okay, education's going to fix it, right? There isn't one science, one curriculum, one framework, right, that we have right now that we can say, all right, here it is, right? Let's go. We got this, right? We need to think about this kind of in a multi-dimensional way, right? How do we pull from different places to support, right? And we need to build that very strong skill set, right? So many systems right now take this eliminative approach, right? Usually, right, you come to, you want to get services because things are really hard, right? There's lots of behaviors that make things challenging, right? Hitting siblings, eloping from the house, ripping curtains off the wall, microwaving remotes, can't sit down, settle down, can't sleep, right? There's lots of things that families seek support for, and how we're going to get some relief from that, right? Historically has been, well, of course, we're going to get rid of those behaviors for you, right? But I think we need to make a huge shift into what are we going to build? Like, what foundation are we going to build to support you to where you don't even have to use those behaviors anymore, right? Those don't need to happen. You've got other ways to meet the environment, meet the world in the way that you want to, right? Not a prescribed way, but in a way that you want to, that works. So the first kind of skill set is regulation. That's obviously no surprise, probably, right? Right? We need to support in noticing levels of regulation, right? What around me kind of makes those things happen, right? Those noticing skills, right? What do I feel like? What do I look like when I'm becoming dysregulated, right? How can people support me? What can I do to support my level of regulation, right? And then we've got kind of different sets of regulation, right? That neurological, that nervous system regulation. We've got the physiological regulation, like those are body processes. I don't know if any of you have individuals, who they don't want to eliminate or pee or poop in any place other than home, right? Or they will hold their pee all day at school, all day, no matter how much water they drink, right? And that is a huge challenge, right? Or holding poop because they have anxiety about pooping in the toilet, right? Those physiological regulation pieces are really critical and can lead to a lot of dysregulation because the body sensations that go along with that are really challenging, right? What can you do when your bladder is so full that it's painful, right? That's huge. All right, and then emotional regulation, right? How do all those emotional capacities fit together to support, right? It isn't just one thing, labeling an emotion or noticing something that makes you mad or having a coping skill or being able to access support. There's so much that go into all of these regulation systems. So how am I going to do that in order to then deploy a behavior that works, not from like a societal box standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, from a personal values standpoint? How am I going to regulate all of these things in my body that are going on with me in this world to do something that's meaningful for me in this space and time, right? Building those emotional capacities, naming emotions, naming body sensations that show up. Man, how annoying is it when you're constantly itchy and you're trying to pay attention? Noticing those things that show up, those emotions, those body sensations, noticing the world around, right? Like, this is when my annoyed emotion shows up the most. Or, one of my long-standing kiddos has named some emotions. She's got frustranoid, right? Which is frustrated and annoyed. And it shows up when my dad can't get that remote to work well. His big thumbs just get in the way, right? That frustranoid, right? But then kind of noticing beyond that, right? How do I notice if I can carry those emotions that show up, that frustranoid emotion, or how do I need to get relief right now, right? A lot of individuals in that kind of PDA profile want relief immediately, right? I want out, especially if they've been under those kind of aversive control spaces. So do I need relief, or can I persist, right? Do I have enough spoons to persist? How am I doing, right? Can I carry those? Can I move towards what's important to me? Or do I need relief? Both are important aspects, right? It isn't always gut it out. It isn't always get relief. Again, it's kind of that messy, non-linear, what can I do right now? But there's a lot to evaluate in there, right? So this is just a helpful visual that we use often to kind of support light and heavy emotions, support some of those emotional capacities, right? An event happens, right? Stuff happens around us all the time. Did a heavy emotion show up, or did a light emotion show up? And I'm going to go on a quick little tangent about light and heavy emotions rather than good and bad emotions. When we talk about things in a standpoint of good or bad, right, most people want to get away from things that are bad, right? So if we label emotions as bad, that without saying anything is telling kids or humans, you want to get away from this. It's bad, right? So when we shift our label to light and heavy, it supports us in showing, hey, light emotions are surely easier to carry. Sometimes they can get really heavy if you're too excited and you're annoying your sibling and they hit you, right? But heavy emotions, right, those are harder to carry, right? It's harder to carry. We want more relief from those. But either way, both light emotions and heavy emotions have very similar ways to support you, right? Tolerate, cope, shift, compromise, ask for help, talk out loud. All of those things are helpful, whether you've got light that are easy to carry or heavy emotions that are harder to carry. So you can also look into the DNAV model of psychological flexibility within Eclipse and the happy medium approach. We utilize that all the time, and I'll probably do a separate crowdcast on that. So here's just kind of another example, and I'm going to kind of make this smaller so we can see the whole page at one time. This leveler goes with the noticing grid, right? We've got kind of emotions, sensations, expectations at the top, and we've got our abilities, right? Our capabilities, abilities, however you want to. I think abilities fit in that bubble easier for me. But, right, when we're in balance, we can carry the emotions, the body sensations, the expectations that are showing up, right? If we start to get too much of one, we're starting to get out of balance, we're starting to get, to a level 2 on the noticing grid, right? What do we need to do to get back to level? And at a level 3, you're totally out of balance. Something's way too heavy, right? You've lost too many spoons. There's too many emotions showing up, too many body sensations, too many expectations, perceived or real, right? And we need to do something about it so that we can get back to level, get back to regulated. So another thing that we know works well is this intrinsic motivation, tapping into true values, leaning into special interests. Right? And on days that motivation is low, because we know these are kind of peaks and valleys. When it's low, being okay that it's low, right? And just hanging, not trying to do the dance, to do the, I'm going to find you something, right? Because then we tend to become dysregulated ourselves. We're getting to a level 2, and dysregulation is really contagious. So tapping into those values, leaning into those special interests, right? Why can't all of their academic subjects be related to that interest right now? To Cleopatra, or all of the famous composers, right? Why can't we build education around some of those special interests? Certainly it's much easier to do when you're doing kind of in-home services, or you're receiving in-home services. The next piece that we know is really important is shared control and flexibility, right? It doesn't have to be on off, right? My control, your control. There are so many spaces in between, right? And you can flex this all the time. There isn't kind of a perfect spot on this continuum of shared control, right? Most often when you're supporting individuals kind of with this PDA profile, it's going to be, the control's going to be on their side, right? That's something that supports their ability to regulate, right? But certainly we want them to build skills around sharing control and flexibility, as we want to see that as a quality kind of in a person who's going to support. The next is making sure that we modify supports for variability, right? There are some days that we see more dysregulation than others. In Happy Medium, we frame this as A, skill access, B, skill access, and C, skill access. We write down, what does this individual look like when they're regulated for most of the day, right? What do they look like? What are those behaviors that tell us that they are having that A day? On a B day, we're seeing a little bit more dysregulation. They're spending a little bit more time. They're needing more support, which is okay. Nothing wrong with needing more support, but they are. What does that look like? And then C access is, man, we're dysregulated. We are having a dysregulated day, seeing a lot of level 2 on their noticing grid, and some level 3s where we're having to keep them safe. Then based on those kind of ways of categorizing, we can notice, hey, an A day is our teach day, right? This is where we're going to do a lot of opportunities to learn those skills that are critical. Our B access day is when we're going to be really thoughtful, right? Do we want to do some teaching right now, or is it better just to support regulation? And then our C day is a full compassion day. Compassion obviously goes throughout all the days, but this is a compassion day. You're having a hard day. I'm going to be here with you. I am just going to be here with you. This is not an eliminate behavior day, right? C day, they are having a hard day. They can't. This is not an I'm going to eliminate challenging behavior day. That's kind of where we tend to go, right? Like, gosh, we got to get rid of this. But these are the days they're having the hardest time. They need the most compassion on these days. All right. And I love my little quote by Winnie the Pooh, so people can read that, but I'm going to keep moving for time. Recognition that progress is absolutely not linear, just like they are not linear, right? Progress is not linear. It's okay that some days they can do things and other days they can't. We want to notice, what's the difference, right? How can we support them in making it easier to do that? Why? What happened in the environment? Did they not sleep? Did they not eat? Were there twice as many peers in that classroom? What was it that made it more challenging, right? Or is it just who they are? And that's okay too. So that remembering that is critical. It's so hard when you go like 2 weeks with kind of great regulation, right? Approaching things that they care about, lower levels of anxiety. And then, seems like out of the blue, we have a dysregulated day, where we're at a level 2 and a level 3 on the noticing grid most of the day, and you're like, man, where did that come from? It's really important. That's the nature of anxiety, which is the foundation of this cluster of behaviors is that anxiety. So we want to support those, right? With those ABC access days. Next thing that we know is categorizing rules and demands, right? Safety rules are the absolute only rules that we need to die on a hill on, right? And I'm talking like safety, like, you're going to die if you don't follow it. Like humans can't swim underwater without scuba gear, or you can't fly off the Empire State Building with paper wings that you've built, right? Like we're talking absolute live or die safety rules. Those are the only rules that we need to, that don't change, right? You can see this little language pairing down here. Safety rules, we define them as you follow these to stay alive or healthy, and they're a no change, right? Then we have household rules, mom or dad, or mom and mom, or grandma and grandpa, whoever that is. Or you can even interchange this with school rules. They make those rules and we follow them in the house and out of the house, and we can change them, right? Mom and dad can change those, or adults can change those. You can compromise on those to change those. And then personal rules are rules that you make for yourself, right? So the only thing that we need to die on a hill about is safety rules. All other rules, expectations, be judicious about it, right? You don't need to put your foot down on things, right? You don't need to die on every hill. I think that's something that's been really challenging for a lot of contexts, a lot of therapeutic contexts, a lot of educational contexts, is, man, we're going to create an escape monster if we let them out of this, right? And sure, science says that's true, right? But we can do so many other things than put our foot down. We've got so many other strategies and skill building that we can do that's going to support them in wanting to approach those things, especially when they care about them. So if you do, and this happens to me all the time as a parent, if you do decide you want to put your foot down and then you're like, oh gosh, I did not want to put my foot down, I did not want to do that, just drop the rope. Drop it, and drop it fast in the escalation curve, right? Drop it before we're so dysregulated that it's kind of, you have to ride the whole escalation curve to get back. Go ahead and drop it. That is totally okay, right? Especially if your individual if your child's withdrawing assent, they're saying, no, I'm absolutely not going to do this. Drop the rope, come back another time. If you drop the rope, you've got oodles of chances to learn again, right? If you're going to get super dysregulated up to a level 3, dangerous and unsafe, we don't have a lot more time to learn. And that's kind of where this nurturing the growth gap comes in, right? Doable opportunities to learn without blowing them up, right? We don't want to get to a level 3 on the noticing grid. We want to avoid that. It's unsafe, it's dangerous, no learning occurs. We want to nurture that growth gap where we're building communication, we're building regulation, we're building emotional capacities, we're building that tolerance. Can I carry these emotions right now or not? That willingness to try, that connection, that activity, different activities that might become really important, and our leisure activities, right? What do we engage in just to be us, right? Like just to spend time doing things that bring us joy, right? We want to nurture that. So I think about it on this pendulum of optimal learning, right? If an individual's staying at a level 1 on their noticing grid all the time, right? All the time, they're not doing much. They're engaged, but they're not learning, right? And we as adults get a lot of relief from that challenging behavior during those times, which sometimes we need to do that, right? If we're on the other side of the pendulum, we're unsafe. We've got too many demands. We got high frequency, challenging behavior, significant dysregulation. Everybody's dysregulated. No learning is occurring. We've got to find that growth gap, that happy medium, that sweet spot where we're providing them enough doable opportunities to learn, but we aren't doing it in a way that becomes unsafe or dangerous. And I think there was a practitioner, Ash said, one of my colleagues, she was like, there's a safe enough gap, right? There's a safe enough, right? Where you're safe enough. We're not going to go to a level 3 or a high level 2, but we are going to grow, right? we're going to step into that uncomfortable space, but it's not such an uncomfortable space that it's an aversive space. It's just uncomfortable. It's just enough. So we want to find that, right? And then the kind of last piece is really building self, right? Who are you, right? Build your own box, right? What are strategies that work for you? What are activities that you love? What are contexts that you love, right? What part of society's rigid boxes do you want to be part of, right? If they don't want to be part of one of those boxes, don't go there, right? But if they do, what parts do fit for you? What parts do work? So, of course, I'm out of time, which always happens, but I'll keep talking about this. I'll do another one to kind of finish up picking out a therapist, but NeuroWild had a great kind of recipe for success. But I do want to talk a little bit about this because it's really important. A lot of practices, a lot of sciences have picked up trauma-informed care. See him at trauma-informed care, neurodiversity affirming practice, compassionate care. And those are verbal labels, but the behaviors that they're using aren't necessarily matching kind of what those stand for in the neurodivergent community. So I think you got to be a little bit careful about that when you're looking for providers. Anyway, there's more ideas down here. And I call it people shopping for a reason. You've got to people shop for a therapist that fits your human, your family, right? We have sciences. We have different ways to organize science, right? We want to be careful because, again, that ethical ripple is really important, right? Anything can be used in an aversive way, right? What is that ethical ripple? So anyway, you guys can read through kind of red flags, green flags. I can talk more about that in another one. You know, I just put together this little last color splash visual for people. Hi from WA. That's awesome. It's amazing just where everybody comes from for these crowdcasts. I love it. So when I think about these critical elements, right, the network of support moving towards meaningful learning, right? That's what we're trying to do, move towards meaningful learning for them, right? Not this pre-prescribed box, right? So we're thinking trust, compassion, connection, autonomy, regulation, shared control, accept variability, emotional capacities, intrinsic motivation, flexibility, non-linear, right? Build self, demand curious. What is demanding to this human? And nurture that growth gap, right? That growth gap, build those skills in that safe spot, right? Where we're doing a little bit, but not so much that they're becoming dysregulated in an unsafe way. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. And I'm sure we'll do some more. I usually do one of these every 2 weeks. So please feel free to join again on various topics. We would love your feedback so we can make these better for you. And hopefully I'll see some of you guys in a couple of weeks.